Hello and welcome to this tutorial on Excel tips and tricks. We're going to cover the AutoSum function. We'll look at a few shortcuts. There's a new function in Excel in the new Office 365 version called text join. And then we're going to do a little bit of data modeling. We're going to bring in some files from a location and actually import them into this Excel file. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so this first one is a tip and trick on using the AutoSum. So the scenario here is we've got a monthly Excel data set that's coming from our ERP system. We want to bring this in and have do a sales report, and so there's just raw numbers here by product ID. And what we want to do here is subtotal the rows for the 3 months of data for the quarter total for each of the product IDs. And then we also want to sum the column for the various months for the sales or order volumes in the columns for these product IDs as well. So typically the way you'd manage this is you do an equals sum formula, right? And you would go in and put that formula in here, and then you would either copy and paste this down, or you would do the double click on the fill handle to bring it down. And then you'd go in here and do equals sum, and then do the same thing here, and then copy across. That's a typical approach on how you would handle this process. Now another way, the shortcut key, you may say, well, the way I deal with this currently is I do go into the cell and do Alt equals, which is the shortcut for AutoSum, and it will detect the range, enter, and copy and down. Copy, down. Do the same thing over here. Alt equals, select the range, and then copy this across. I'm going to show you another pro tip here for you to do that same exercise, but with one click. So here we're going to select the range. We want to sum all of this data across the two axes, the horizontal and the vertical. And we're going to bring the range out to the column to the right where we want our totals for Q1. And then we're going to bring it down to the totals of where we want our totals for our rows. So just by having this selected, now we're going to do the Alt equals. And with just two keys, we put all those formulas in. Let me just show you that again. I'll remove these and I'll show you once more. So we're going to select the range of the data that we want. We're going to come out to the row and the column, so to the cells, the blank cells that we want the formulas to be in. And when we do the Alt equals, Excel knows that that's the data. It takes those ranges across those formulas and it applies into all of those open cells the formula. Alt equals puts the formulas into there, and you can go in and look at those formulas and check to make sure that they populated correctly. Okay, that's our first pro tip for today. And today we're going to also look at shortcut keys. So I've got 3 of them here to talk through with you. So tables, converting a range to a table format. If you're not familiar with a table format and what it's used for and why you would use it, I have a separate video for that on the channel that you can take a look at and learn more about why you would consider using tables. Tables essentially format is good for pivot tables. If you do a lot of pivot tables, really you should be looking at using pivot tables as your source for those pivot tables inside your Excel files. So the shortcut key here is Control and T. Control and T brings up the dialog box for creating a table. Yes, my data does have headers, so I'm going to click OK. Once that happens, then you're going to see this table design appear up here on the ribbon, and you can click then into here and you can do things like changing the format. You can do some other things as well. You can name that table. You can apply different options to that as well. Turn off filters and the like. So Control T converts the date range into a table. The second one here is the Control D, so down or D for data. So here we've got some text, North America. Instead of doing a copy and paste, Control C, Control V, or copy from the home menu and then paste, we can just come to the cell underneath and press the Control D shortcut and copy it down. Control D, copy it down. Same here, we've got another text. We can do the same thing here. Control D copies it down. Just something to note here, if you want to copy a range down, so you copy the range, you can select the columns and do Control D and it will copy them down as well. And you can just keep repeating this as well. Here we've got a text, but it's a combination of numbers and text. I often get this question of, does some of these shortcuts work or functions work with a combination? So this is a text and numerical field. Again, Control D and it copies it down. Now here we've got numbers. Now these are not formulas, these are just numbers here. So when I do the Control D here, it copies the number down. It's not going to increment, right? It's not a formula, it's just copying the value that's above it. Now in this field here, or this cell here, we have a formula. It's taking the quantity on the same row in the previous column and then it's timesing it by 20. So when we come to the cell underneath here and we do Control D, it copies that formula down. Let me just change these to 3, 4, 5, and you'll notice that as I do a Control D underneath, it copies the formula down to the next row and then obviously refers to the next value that's in that column Q. The third shortcut that I want to talk about today is the apply filter. Now I'm sure many of you filter data ranges today, and so you're used to probably going up to the data tab on the ribbon and then coming across to the filter to turn filters on or turn filters off. The shortcut key here is to highlight the range or a cell in that table, in that range, in the header. Control Shift L applies them and then Control Shift L removes them. So you can use this interchangeably, and notice as I'm cycling through the keyboard shortcut, you'll notice this icon here turns on and off. Okay, so we're going to go to our next example here. This is around flash fill. So if you're not familiar with flash fill, this is a fairly new function. It's actually on the data tab on the ribbon, and it's over here in the data tools, flash fill. It has a shortcut of Control E, and what it does is it takes data based upon the input you give it and based upon its logic, and it tries to match what you do with the other cells, and then it tries to fill them to the remainder of the range. So let me show you an example. Here I've got a list of employees. So let's say, for instance, these are your budget holders, and HR's given you this list of all the budget holders, and you're trying to run your financial report by that person's, let's say, last name. And so you want to extract the name. Now you could use some other text functions, mid, left, right, and identify what the length of the name is, the last name, and then extract that. That can take quite a lot of time to set up, and if you want a quick and easy way to extract that name, then we're going to go ahead and show you how to do that today. So first name, what I'm going to do here is type out the first name here in my list. So Samuel here. Now notice when I go to the next one and I type P for page, notice that Excel is guessing what I'm doing. It's noticed that in the first section in that table I typed the word Samuel, and then when I put the P in there, it is thinking, it's guessing that my intent is to go down the entire list and type that name. Believe me, I've worked with people. There was one lady that was in a marketing group, and I saw her doing this with hundreds of names on a massive list. She was very pleased when I showed her how to do this in a matter of seconds. She was very grateful. So you type the P in this example, and you'll notice that list, and press enter, and there's your list of all the names. We can do the same thing here now with the last name. So we'll go here and we'll type in Hutchinson and press enter, and then we'll put the W for Watts. Again, Excel is looking at that range and interpreting what I'm doing, and is now going to guess that I want the last name. So now it's going to apply the same logic. It's going to find the first letter of the second word and then it's going to copy that down. Enter, and there's all of your last names. We can also do a few things, like we could look at initials. So if we put the S and the H for Samuel Hutchinson, and then we put the P, notice now it's guessing again, and it's now going to identify the initials for those individuals. Now there's a few limitations to this. One, if you have middle names, and some employees have middle names and some do not, Excel's going to get a bit confused as to, do you want the middle name, do you want the last name, do you want the first name? So there are some limitations to this. The biggest limitation to this, though, is this is a one-time exercise that it's done the flash fill. If Paige was to leave the company and the next list we get from HR is now not having Paige in there, this doesn't update. You'd have to rerun that process again. So it's very, very helpful for creating tables like for master data, where you're going to create this list of, let's say, employees, account numbers, things that don't necessarily change day by day. Product IDs is a really good example. But if you've got things that change every single week, every single month, and that list of, let's say, GO&I accounts, where the GO&I accounts can change month over month, week after week, this might not be the most effective way, because you're going to have to rerun that process again and again. There's other tools that we're going to cover, Power Query, text formulas, other things that can do this same process. But this is a really quick and easy way, tip and trick, for you to be able to achieve this goal. Okay, let's move ahead to the next one. So this is an example of where we're going to get data from a folder. So the scenario here is that your IT department sends you a file each month. And in that file, it's got some order details that you want to put into your financial report. So the typical steps that you might do today would be to save those files somewhere on a shared drive, open up each file, copy that data into a master file which you've opened, paste append the data from January, put February data underneath it, then March, etc. Close all those input files, hope that your Excel doesn't crash in the process, which many of you have probably experienced numerous times, and then save the master file, refreshing it and updating your charts, your pivot tables, etc. What if we could do that and get rid of steps 2 to 5? What if we could automate that in Excel with no VBA language, with no coding, just with a few simple clicks, to automate it so that the files are connected to your Excel workbook, and then you can automatically refresh them every single month with new data. Let's have a go at what we mean here. So we're going to grab data from the Excel files, the source files that our IT in this example have provided to us, and we're going to use a new tool, fairly new tool to Excel, called Power Query. You can find Power Query on the Data tab on the Get Data section, and we're going to use the From Folder function, which is under File, From Folder. So let's go ahead and navigate to there. We're going to go to Data, Get Data, From File, From Folder, and I'm going to navigate to the location for these files. So this is my file, my folder that's got my files within it, and I'll click Open. We'll notice then that in the file folder we've got these 3 files, the January, February and March. Excel's going to give us some details around those files, but what we want to do is we want to combine them. They're all the same format, they're an extract from the system, IT's running the extract for us, and we're going to combine them all together. So we're going to go to our drop down here of Combine, and we're going to do Combine and Load. Now I'm going to do Load 2, you could click Combine and Load. I'm just going to click Load 2 because I want to place it on this worksheet for this training session. They've all got sheet 1. All the files in the folder have got sheet 1 within them. So I'm going to click on the sheet 1, I get a preview of the data, and now I'm going to click OK. It's going to establish a connection to those files, and it's going to ask me, where do I want to import the data to? So I'm going to say I want it into a table, and I'm going to say that I want to put it, I'm going to put it somewhere around somewhere around here, just so it's visible to us all to see here on the video. We'll click OK. Now notice what happened here. Excel went in here and it created a query for us. And this query is then telling us how many rows of data it imported. So it opened up the 3 files, it went and grabbed all the headers, grabbed all the data underneath those headers, and then populated them into a nice table for us. Let's just take a quick look at that table for a second. We've got the file name. We can query this and we can take it out if we need to. We can cover that in another video. We've got the month end date, product, store, quantity information, but notice we have the data here for February. We have the January file and we have the March file. Now we haven't done any sorting here or anything at this point. We could do all of that and sort it by date and everything else, but the purpose of this is to show you we can bring all this data in. So now we have the data automatically formatted as a table. We know that because we've got the table design here. And I'm going to go ahead and just create a very quick pivot table just for an example purpose. So let me come here and I'll click OK. And I'm just going to bring the month end date into the rows and the quantity style into the values. So here's our values now. Okay, very quick, simple pivot table. We could do a chart and some other analysis and all of that, min, max, etc. But what happens then? This is all very well having these 3 files connected. What happens when I get April data? What happens? So let's go and try that. Let's go and test that out. So I'm going to go and grab my folder for that month, and I'm going to grab the file that has got the April data within it. So here's our folder. This is the folder that we have the Excel connected to. There's our 3 files, and here's my April data. So imagine now you're at month end. You've got the data for your April month. You're going to save it in this location. So that's all you're going to do. Take it from your email. If this is a shared drive, have your IT save it to the shared drive. And look at the magic that's going to happen now. All we're going to do is go to Data, Refresh. Now notice here it said it went from 150 to 200 rows. Let's have a look down here. We've got February, we've got January, we've got March, and now we have April data. Now to refresh the pivot table, we need to refresh the pivot table again. So we'll click Refresh the pivot table. And now automatically there's all of our data. We didn't have to go open any files. We didn't have to copy and paste anything. We didn't have the human error of making a mistake and overriding any data. Imagine if these files were really, really large files, large records. This would be a huge time-saving activity. Let's go to our next example. How many times do you see this or feel like this? You've got data that gets sent to you that you need to do some kind of manipulation to. You've got to manipulate the data as part of your day-to-day activities and getting files ready. So in this example, what we're going to try and do here is we're going to try and bring these columns together. Now there is a concatenation formula that you can use. So you can do concatenate, and you can bring this column along with this column, along with this column and this column. You can bring them all together into a nice formula. Now you'd probably want to put some spaces in there as well, so we can go back into here and we can put in some spaces in here if we need to. Right? And things like that. Now that's all very well, but it would be better if we could do some better formula which would allow us to join these together. Now some of you may be saying, well, instead of concatenate I use the ampersand. So you put the and quotation marks with a space and then the ampersand sign again, etc. Right? You repeat that through all of the different columns and the different cells. And then just one more. And there's the last one. So here we've got the cell reference, the ampersand with the space inside of the quotations, then another ampersand, the cell reference, and we repeat this all the way through. And there's our nice, this is a better format, right? This is a better format than this. We've got spaces in between the names. Let me just increase the size of these just to make them a little bit easier for you to read. The new format, the new formula that's available, this is called text join. Text join allows us to put a delimiter in between. So let's just say for this case, we're going to put a comma and then a space. We have the ability in this formula to ignore empty cells. So here we've got an empty cell here for a given name. Well, if we put a delimiter in where they're in between the title, the given name, and the surname, what will happen is if we don't ignore the blanks, then what will happen is we'll have two commas next to each other, which we don't really want. So in this example, we're going to say we want to ignore the cells, the empty cells, because we're going to put true in here. And then this is the power of this formula. It allows us to apply a range. So we can go in here and just apply just the range. So imagine if this is 30 columns wide. 30 columns wide using either of these previous two methodologies would be really time consuming to set up. But here we can apply a range, we'll close the brackets, and there's our formula. So notice here that we've got now a delimiter in between each of the cells, right, between the Mr. and the Peter. And as we drag down, notice that when we get to this line here, we don't get the two, we get the comma between the Mr. and the Kerr, but we don't get another one here where there's a blank. Let me just change this formula to be false. And you'll notice we get the two. That's the default behavior if we were to use this formula here. This brings us to the end of the session. Thank you for watching. There are a couple of ways for you to follow here on our Twitter handle and also through our YouTube channel. Thank you. Hopefully you found this helpful. We'll talk to you again on the next video. Thank you.